A Cloud of Clouds, Jake Carlins, 2022. The field is dark, her eyes raven black. She doesn't like loud things, neither did my father. The field is loud with insects. Everyone dislikes poetry except for poets and teachers. I'm both. The dusty halls corrupt with tradition, the halls by the field full of bugs and growth and plants, traditional plants and beings. The field is loud with life, insects, growth, and old poets. Insects, growth, and old plants. Should that growth go anywhere? Of course, chaos is not the goal, only enhanced chaos, which is to say order, in order to last. Trying to make something to outshine the dark luster of the past. The field is loud with insects, her eyes raven black. I don't like loud things. A symptom of language. Old ways are close to wisdom and truth. There are things old beyond time. Look at something and beyond the words. Look at the dark eyes, or just the eyes, crows appearing and disappearing. My mother is ambivalent about his decision. Well, if he wants to. Will the father rediscover decency and have a change of heart? It is less than clear that this exists as a symptom of language. Sense exists as a symptom of language, meaning the spells or manipulations are a kind of straw horse. Meaning is a spell. What is to be accomplished? People have their aims. Other beings have their aims. We're making soup in the middle of a simmering pot of soup as we're being cooked. The Duke happens upon them in the forest, having met a holy man and been converted. He has to speak to them. He has to say the words again, the same words from every performance, but in new ways. His eyes changed. It happens as a sort of failure to process. His eyes changed place and time. He approaches. Then it was loud. This was the temple, deep cavernous eyes. In a cloud of smoke, beautiful songs, words memorized. It was alive. In the backyard, we used to have a place of wildness, pine trees, a chaotic space between ours and the neighbors. Seeing her there, black eyes, dark birds flying through a music sky. In the backyard, we had a place of wildness, the old singer in a gorilla suit offering his tail to the viewer like a joint. In that place, we'd some years throw our old Christmas trees, Christmas the most depressing of holidays. But that changed later when the bonfire started at the farm. Now they have a bonfire in my town to get rid of those old trees. People come and sell fried dough at the bonfire, merry-go-round, rink, loud music out of big speakers, a place of wildness. Don't forget, this fire in the backfield of some old farm, people circling in the mud. A bliss in proof, the lessons are distilled, but just that, bliss, bottled in words, trustworthy, real. Clear, even if black, like the black dog in front of 7-Eleven. It walks around, the black neighbor's dog who would come to visit us, the little black dog who's the other pet, not Brown County Owl, but his brother, almost like a cat, so small. Meanwhile, the great explorer found vitality as opposed to this fantastic escaping and denying. He was called the great explorer. He was as tall as the universe. The robbers break in. He cannot be described. Previous descriptions fall short. He was called the great explorer. He was as tall as the universe. The robbers break in. It becomes nightmarish. What he found was the truth about vitality, being vital. He killed many people and conquered that last thing, death. The man of discovery was brutal and aggressive, unlike we are today. This was in the past. This was in the past. The robbers break in. He discovered many things in amazing ways. He wrote them down to make the whole thing less real. It was divine honey. It was healthy and reasonable. It was not honey, only that it was very sweet, and its actions were sweet. Bees seeing it wouldn't call it honey. Reasonability is most powerful and useful, both for good and ill. We went in and out of ourselves in the most meaningful way possible. At the Kite Festival, they're all lined up in formation. These days I find myself seeing myself from the outside more often in a healthy way. I can see how others might see me approximately, and it helps with the perspective. A perverse light whose imperative of subtlety dooms. There was a schedule of meaning, but it was the monkey mind. There was no overseer, but it doesn't exactly address the question. I love my teachers so much, but will not tell them, I'm afraid. Beauty, power, and vitality are very rich. The entire equation, somehow it all functioned. I've always been one of those people who feel they deserve to be famous. We all feel this way in America, and it's just a simple bait and switch. We really feel that way. I carry a secret bird cage out to my car. I will drive to the forest. I've been meaning to buy a copy of Flowchart for about 15 years, but it's expensive. Maybe this year. Maybe this year I'll harvest sweet clover of normalcy, of meaning, being able to stay with the meaning of ordinary experience. Instead of needing to show off with words and demand the proof of existence art provides. Actually, since I started writing this, I found a free copy of the book at a gray, dusty, used bookstore and brought it home. It has been on a pile for about 6 months. I have not read it. I carry a secret bird cage out to my car. I'm not even sure where the book is now. Your eyes in photos look watery and haunting, both kind and extremely threatening, a little like your poems. A little like your poems, but not completely, because your poems weren't all that scary, just that they destroy something, connection and complete destruction. Destruction of those little infectious thoughts, the downside of ordinary life, those thoughts and memories, which believed in refused to go away. I carry the bird cage out to my car, and of course poetry is about love, and one of those kinds of love is understanding, being able to read. Are my thoughts good? Are my thoughts important to control and purify? I go back and forth on this as time passes. The secret bird cage, the robbers breaking in. Are my thoughts good? I show up as the beggar wanting attention. My thoughts show up as beggars wanting attention. Are my thoughts important to control and purify? They show up as animals, insects, weather, not wanting attention really, but wanting to cause chaos and unleash their energy, which is hard because the container wants them to dissolve without releasing it. As time passes, I forget some art and artists, while others just loom larger, more powerful, richer. Ashbery, Dylan, Shakespeare. No one talks about this aspect of dying. You accumulate richness in your life. It gets better and more powerful in some ways, and that must be hard to leave behind. I keep getting chased but keep escaping. We are all equal in death. We are all equal in having to die and living with it. I accumulate ideas and so-called growth. Others accumulate things. It's all the same, just some of us know it a little bit more. I could thank the artist, but should I? It's all more baggage to carry, and it being beautiful just makes it that much heavier. You can make me light. You can make being vital. I have a dream about lucid dreaming. It helps to not think, so be it. It helps to think. This is sad, a sad thought. Thought is a process we engage in. It helps to think more about culture, such as downloading the storm. Storms I've seen. In Newburyport, flooding from a hurricane 30 years ago, watching the river in our street from the front porch. I can't remember the actual porch, just that it existed. Windstorms in Santa Fe that almost became tornadoes. They say there was a tiny one or two close by. In Amesbury, the giant snowstorm that broke all records. They said crews were brought in from the Midwest just to handle the plowing, shoveling, and so on. They said this. They stole ideas off death. They stole ideas of death. Prisoned my heart. The decency of the Americans. On some level, I've been meaning to buy in, but it's expensive. It's expensive to understand. We tried to understand what mind is and what happens to it after death. They stole death. They stole ideas of reality. They stole faces of culture's discomfort. They had collections of blurred out faces. I bought their faces, but when I did buy in, and as I always knew somewhat, it is expensive, like giving birth to yourself. It is difficult, and some difficult things are worth it. I look at myself crying in the reflection on the window and smile. I don't remember this at all because I was young and my memory blurs sometimes. My wife will tell me about recent past events which I can't recall, like waves of lemon balm, and gets mad at me. And I get a little scared because this is not so many years ago. The oceans around me recently get larger sometimes, but in reality I don't panic so much at their depth and threatening pervasion of time and space. I am happier now, saner, healthier, if not better. Have I learned? Maybe. One thing I've learned is navigating feelings, and feelings are constant. Black waves rolling in, black waves rolling into gray, gray waves rolling into an explosion of colors, and then red of sunset. Interesting how we change roles like colors. Time has, now at least, this weird way of warping things from good to bad back to good again, so you don't know where you are, even if you know when you are. I will say this, I appreciate the beauty of those old books I borrowed from my father, the old editions very slowly decaying and yellow and crumbling at the edges in the study, then later in an old barn in the country. So the work itself changes. The books decay and change, but the physical object does not. It stays beautiful and interesting. Someone tries to strangle me from behind with a thick rope. Meanings overgrow and die and compost and cycle, but what can't be rejected or cast out is the beauty of a thing. It lands on a thing when seen and leaves someday, but only to land on something else. Same beauty, thus same thing. Mungan. We are reaching a time when beauty is something people are too weak to love. Time moves like water, and this age is largely an era of cowardice. People are afraid to love beauty. When the building of alienation manifests as a kind of hysteria, it is made of high-tension confusion, a paralysis. Are you alone? It helps to not think now. It helps to not think more sadly. It helps to think death is real, and it helps to think as an accident. It's still shocking to see the bloody wound underneath the many layers of clothing, the nurses put on me. It helps to think more because the storm is imaginary. One time I switched. You can make medicine with rose hips, rosemary, marjoram, and tarragon. You can make medicine and not just live a normal life. Are you alone? You can make medicine, but then I've always been interested in sorcery. You can make medicine even if you don't deserve to. The eyes and heart might be untrustworthy, but maybe they just need to be trained. It's still shocking to see the wound, which is not right in the heart as I thought previously, but to the right of the heart. When he glanced at the meaning that nobody else saw, he saw words in the now, beings in the air. Do not waste it meaninglessly. Things were about to happen and time was much more kind, bubbling up in itself a little like your poems. The guests showed up, a bloody wound. Are you alone? It is so good when a poem tells a story, and the love of it is simple in its being ordinary, like the old field rotting in itself, like the cared-for garden without concern for competition, like the deer that walked gingerly around our house for a year or so. That time I might have gotten Lyme disease from a bug bite, and my leg turned purple. Then black spread up the limb until I was feverish. My heart felt strange. I ended up in the emergency room on an IV. The nurses peel off the layers of shirts covering my wound, the wound over my non-heart. It's amazing how ordinary the emergency room is when you feel scared, but also ashamed to be making such a fuss. Such are the little stories of life, which is close to death for people like me with few stories to tell. I have stories of the ocean, as large as a giant black elephant, stories of flocks of black owls like eyes overlooking humanity, the black birds emerging from the gorilla as someone sneaks up from behind to strangle me, the robbers entering our house, and I call 911. Some realities like nature come out of healing and heal. Some realities like nature come out of delusion and cause delusion. She disappeared. She reappeared in flames of infamy. An owl manifested dreams and the way. Many cats and kittens swarming. My grandmother appears to say, whatever job you get, I'm sure it will be workable. The edge of town multiplied. As she vanished and came back, the city changed, morphed, and grew. The walls were fragile. They were like locusts. The walls between me and her, self and other. They grew branches. Their neighbors. She grew branches of thought and stylish energy. She became my neighbor, the person opposite. Responses to this are relevant. It pulsed inside them. It pulsed that separation and tension, the ideas and rivers of feeling, love and hate, black waves and gray waves. Things like prayer and meditation were like a beautiful dream beat. But what were prayer and meditation really in comparison to the actions of a moment, the little gestures of touching a face, holding, serving food, cleaning, laughing, being silent? Sometimes the wildness and wideness of life need just themselves. Sometimes the wilderness and wildness of life need some ordering. Order like the inside of an eye, order like waves upon waves, order like poetry. When I was young, I would sense that control over circumstances rests mostly in the body. And yes, of course, control is not only rarely possible, but scarily delusional, magic, and all that entails. I get a little frightened in society. There's so many different people, so many dark eyes, so many flying beings. Trust engenders expression. I don't trust the way I used to. Isn't it sad and gravity-laced that people often trust less as they get older? Drop of insight deliberately falls away from rhythms of satisfaction. I can't find my car in the dream, just like I lost it in San Francisco that one night, and spent an hour or two wandering until I found it. It's amazing how ordinary it is when you feel scared. Such are the little stories that howl, that arise in the space of traditional rhythms. Silence is the mark of nonverbal communication. The love of it is subtle rhythms. The old feel rotting has some freedom. When I was young, I would count things and decide on when to act, and this hasn't changed much, as though I went through a phase of worrying, then controlling, then allowing myself to be a flawed guy who is still trying to work on some things. People get caught up in humanistic representations of God or gods. It's very easy to do and easy to laugh at also. Humans, new men, truths, roofs. Why worry about those old myths? Why worry? Why concern yourself or think unwell? Ravens drop down the sky making weird noises, calling to you or each other. The deep call of love and community. I own a weapons store with my parents, and my friends and I visit some abandoned house and find an old spell book. We read the spells and they disappear. Disappearances and invisibility are Hades. I go back later to try and reread it and join them, but I can't, and I stay in my world. The world unfurled, not early, shiny as a pearl. Well, the whole science thing doesn't do it. Those people usually end up lost in the mind, and the whole not mattering thing doesn't work either. Same deal, Mungan. Or they just end up working until they die, lost in weird labyrinths of their own mental creation. Humans, new men, truths, roofs, people lost in the mind. They are shadows, ghosts, living in death, and yet so alive, so present that when they die, we all say, but they were just here, and we love them. Is the love for the dead the same as living love? It is actually better to die in someone else's labyrinth, lost. This is the one thing I've learned. This is the one form of devotion, to be lost in someone else's labyrinth. Passageways of lavender, morinda, noni, turmeric, sea holly, someone else's living beings. Taking walks lets you appreciate others' gardens. It's a nice way to let yourself get lost, taking a walk, just visible enough and just invisible enough. Very nice. The overall point is, I hope, good. The South Asian clerk is a little cautious with me, and alienation is not the end game. Some may say you're alone and hopeless, but would this help? I have included references and memories here. Our obsessions. Misguided love. Ravens are owls, and ravens are not owls. My friend won't talk to me, becomes a little dog with a mask on, a persona. I pick him up and he becomes a loaf of bread that I distribute. I share caringly. The world is not ideas that seem interesting. Then again, all we see are ideas, filters, and this doesn't have to be a death sentence. When irritated people are panicky, let's take a step back. A big argument with the drama, it usually can't be coded criticisms of dominant cultures. Vultures perch and perches watch. Criticisms are filters. Appreciations are filters. There is no way out. I have included references and memories here. It is a matter of being identity who is doing something. Just being ourselves is a panicky affair. I look out the window to identity. Here's a better idea, simple, but this little model does work like a park of old possibilities waving in the winds of description. Ravens are owls and owls are ravens. I have included references and memories here. Love, misguided love. It turns into ego style, ego sadness, like we're always watching our back, paranoid without having smoked any weed, just paranoid that we exist, and this someone makes us exist as our own paranoid fantasy. It takes a man to see. There is a dance performance, but I don't attend. Oh, to be free of checking, to be free in simplicity, in a rock, in a wind, in a painting, in reading a poem and just loving it like a pop song. You know that you love it, and there it is, like underfoot angel grass, frangipani kasamono, and it doesn't have to become a life or death struggle, or if it does, that's good too, because it is as simple as life and death. Lively birds calling, lively eyes watching. I take on the pirates with my friends and we actually win. Take on the pirates, it takes a man to see. It would work out meanings to these terms. This has been said. Other things have been able to understand what I'm saying. The sky was blue at various points in time. The birds were white, forcefully enough. The subway is like a maze. Something would mean a sort of conclusion about one's place. But the words were cosmos. This was always the issue. Owls called hollowly from nearby trees. It was almost impossible to actually find them if you looked, though. The sky was blue. This needs to be reiterated. It was quiet. History as a cycle, knowing very well what it meant to be human. It meant to be a bird, an owl, a purpose. I wrote a lot of poetry in college, and it took a long time to write it, and I was reading a lot too, and I felt like I got it, but didn't at all. Not like I do now. Now is the time, and tomorrow is the time. One foolish heart, a silly pirate, an elevated toilet, nothing makes sense. The wolves raging against the charnel void until it's cleared, and I sigh, and order. I showed a poem to an old friend. He didn't get it. He told me so. Hiding out in a building, my friends and I are attacked by our enemies who have tanks or construction vehicles. I used some books as armor. I got very angry because I knew there was nothing to get. There was no scorpion to squish, no dog to kick, no cat to throw, but sadly this didn't happen in this order. He'd said this years before about poetry that was more confessional, stuff I was writing before I'd gone back to school, and the poem he'd read was about him, I think. About me being annoyed by him, so really it was perfect that he didn't understand, thus turning the moment into a little poem of mirroring. These days I write simpler stuff, I get it less, although I'm more stubborn when I do. Haven't seen that friend in forever. Another reality, let's look at the elements of hysteria in terms of magic, words and joy. Your misery is the real thing anyway. Clouds of ravens falling down upon the ground. We don't see them attacking really or damaging. Bizarre how they got such a bad reputation for bad luck, etc. Their society enlivens the world just like order destroys in order to create room for creation. The twins appear. I argue with my sister. Fertility of mind. Mind roams. Mind too. The inability to sleep as one is awake. To have an idea, to have an area of wildness that I will be writing, being in a globally connected world that is highly influenced by being. Frozen. This is the way materialism works. One of the twins and I go into a room, wallpaper of birds and leaves. She doesn't like the wallpaper. The mind is just the mind, solving mind problems. This is American Buddhist art. Obviously, the whole endeavor is about ambition and self-importance. The trends and lingo, the constant striving and energy. Feel good about yourself because of something, otherwise it will be flat. Something is amiss. Meditation, this might be the best. It's not work, it's not virtue, it's art. It was so good. I was going to write it into my novel. It was one of those dreams that actually was like an incredible story with a logical progression. But then I never wrote it down. I try to remember it, but my brain won't allow me. It's possible people don't write enough about that back and forth struggle with one's own mind, which is separate but also the same. I struggle to focus like birds against the wind. We kiss, but she doesn't like it. She says my tongue is slimy. I did write some other dreams, cutting up the pirates with our long knives, some other long weapon. Ares appears, making room for Hermes' fire, the possibility that one deity makes room for another, clearing the way. The overall point is, she appeared in a dream. The South Asian clerk is made of cedar. There are birds on the wallpaper. The robbers appear and it's like a nightmare again. A panicky affair. It's like a game. Black birds change into white birds in a checkerboard. Death, recognition, magic. The sky was blue. The birds were black, therefore the sky was white. He was a perception, like a park of old possibilities. It's like a game of certainty, clarity, rules, and I look out the window. It's not laziness or cynicism to offer quiet. The mind is just the mind. That is why you keep going forever. There are so many different people. Something is amiss. We're driving around on sand. When I was young, I would sense that controlling the audience is vampirism of the soul, words and joy, waves of lemon balm. Some kind of understanding. What do animals understand? Maybe something we're not honest enough to, meaning we do already understand. A circle of eyes in the sky. Vanity is closed. I am cut in half at the spine and I can feel the blood flowing out. We were trying to understand what mind is. You can make being into vital criticism. It helps to not think, so be it. Each one had power from one's God. It helps to think about culture, such as many waves were already clear. Address the question to worldly realms. Mind, it's expensive. What happens to it after death of jewels and precious metals? Dreams downloading the storm. Poets write about death, but I wonder how close their contact is with it. For me, it is not very close. For so many in America, not that close. Is it honest to make the claim that it's nearby on either inner or outer levels? I don't know. Death is something they say you can have a relationship with, but this is like one's relationship to the sun, always there, so is establishing and having just a control move or worse. A famous actor goes downhill in an inner tube in the snow. He looks dirty and disheveled. Is it too much to even think making such a friendship meaningful? Is the relationship with the same thing as a relationship with language? When I run outside and see a coyote trotting along, stopping and staring back at me pretty much fearless, is this a relationship with death? Well, that's an oversimplification, but sometimes in this world of complexity we need to oversimplify to even know what simple means. Sometime later, I see another coyote, or the same one, standing in the middle of the road as I drive by, just staring at me and the other passengers. One time I walked by a coyote rotting on the side of the road, small birds streaming out of it, eyes clicking at me. The order establishes itself, the shining armor, the light. It made his eyes change. The storm is in a cloud. The parking lot is flooded. I argue with the firemen. It was a rough idea, the decency of ideas. You can't make an owl of purpose or of ideas. It's too confining. To be wild is to be unconfined like the sky. When he glanced, people talked. Birds flowed from their mouths, bubbling up in the guest. He had a dream, the guest said. It was divine. She looked out. Melodramatic alienation manifests. His deep cavernous eyes were imaginary. Beautiful songs of reality. Exhausting how unfortunate I feel. Meaning a separate kind of medicine of separateness. The other means that will never connect really. Their spiritual practices of the meaning found that vitality is opposed to meaning. They saw people conquered in many amazing ways, a little like in your poems, many worlds, a different person. Do you know how lucky you are? It's good to appreciate. Be appropriate. Not that you can't be sad, but does the audience have to love you and love your words and support your foggy, effusive complaint in order to promote this sense that there is something profound to it when it's just a confessional thing? Is it just sickness being coughed out? Beings aloft, turning wealthy, learning about healthy and unhealthy ways to get it out, get the crazy birds out, owls streaming from your mouth, feeding an orange to an eagle. Look inside and there are many eyes and mouths inside eating the orange slice. But then, are angry poems any better? Same sickness, Mungan. Yes, they are, and I will tell you why. Because they find something and sharpen it. Fighting what is wrong is fine, even when it's not a matter of justice. Appreciation is the greatest gift of life, emblazoning the whole being. Without the ability to cut things down, the forest can't grow. I get bothered because the walls were fragile. The walls Gallic jump and twitch. I sneeze and a tooth flies out, or maybe part of my skull. The television grew branches. Addiction to sitting around and thinking are not going in circles. Traditional rhythms and the discontinuous nature of speech, two responses to this are relevant. Prayer and meditation are like free-flowing hysteria and alienation. Sleep is magic. Even old poets are predictable. Addiction to being unpredictable in small ways because I need to fit in. Fairness, justice, they are sedatives, especially when it comes to the ancestors. It helps to digest one's problems with the ancestors and the internally positive bonfire of symptoms. Problems get better over time, the journey of your heroic life. You must burn things in a self and in a community. He was a different person, reinventing yourself again and again. We could not look beyond the words. She disappeared. She reappeared less than clear. I don't know if it's even possible to be totally clear-headed. Clearly disappeared as a symptom, and an owl manifested. Do you think you can tell rich people just by looking at them? I think I can. There's a kind of bodily integrity to them, a lack of openings or gaps of smoothness. My baby looks like Klingon, but white. I noticed as I got older that my parents noticed the status and wealth of others. Somehow up to that point I'd assumed they had the same view as me of equality, of the unimportance of externals. My wife and I sold our house, so we have money finally, and I wonder if I look like that very occasionally. I wonder if the rest of the world looks at us like that, Americans. Better than being poor. It's impossible to be poor. There's always someone poorer. Every Sunday when we lived in Haverhill, we watched Star Trek together on the TV. You can see where people are sometimes, and they're being together or not. Like you can look at a garden and see the mind of the gardener, which has nothing to do with the words hawthorn, silver birch, Cetizus, Scoparius, Populus, Pichia, Abies, Juglans, Regia, but then you could, with enough training, look at the words themselves and see the ancestors behind them in those letters and sounds, stars flying by. My parents try to feed the baby but get mad and throw some flour in his face. The ancestors give us puzzles just as valuable as how to get rich or how to be successful and happy, but not more valuable. They have an ocean of meaning. When I was young, I went to different sorts of places. Powwows, Motel 6s, before they got so sketchy. Highways, parks, the CVS, where I spent hours once or twice and felt sick and hypnotized by the end, as if drowning in an understanding of what mind is. I get a little scared, a sense that it is a dangerous God. I accidentally steal something. Silence is the mark of one's God, and the old fields, rotting of ideas about confusion. It's amazing how we are already clear, like a weird point in time. A weird point in time is between two groups of ancestors, the past and the future, the owls and the ravens, the old wolves, past, and the new wolves, future. Death is real and it is an accident, more so because it is imaginary. Traditional rhythms are medicine, even if you don't know the meaning. Some freedom from movement meaninglessly is about to happen in the present. Everything is fun. Everything is fun again. This is what art is. This is what art does. I am so happy. I am glad that art can be light and superficial. beauty, power, then it was loud. What is loud? He had a dream. Ideas, numbers appeared. I live in a tent in the woods with some other guys. I noticed for years my tendency to count things and plan to do things a certain number of times, which seemed like OCD, even if the self-diagnosis of OCD is sloppy and a cliche. So I tried to stop unsuccessfully for a long time, and then somehow it started to go away as I kept fighting, and the next level was realizing that numbers are concrete, physical in a way, and sometimes it's okay to use them that way to calm down, to find ground, earth. Numbers burn the fields to make room. Numbers are burning crows tearing through the charnel sky. He stole the various owl of purpose. They stole ideas off the guest. We lived in a tent in the woods. The decency of the divine isn't one of the biggest signs of spiritual wisdom, just decency. An aggressive place and time. It pulsed inside them like a beautiful dream. Deep cavernous eyes and beautiful flowing songs. There's a break-in. Why is it so hard to go beyond the aggression around you, the curse of a time or place? Beyond worlds, many words. Life was hard. It was healthy and reasonable. Wolves were vomiting Garudas on fire, and the flames were shooting off sparks of glowing wolves, which were vast skies. The walls were fragile. They grew branches, but it was the morning, the feeling of waking up, that spring feeling. All time tends to become a function. All time tends to become functional. Someday, studying time will become trendy. Not anytime soon, though. Somehow this impacts the outer in some other way. It is loud with insects at the same time. Society, loud with ancestors. They have a bonfire of sympathy, using energies as a distraction. Distracted from what? I read the same poem many times, and each time it is different. I read the same poem many times, and each time it is different. I read the same poem many times, and each time it is different. My work recycles itself, and I can't tell if this is something good or just laziness. These two use words to control the planes. I take flying lessons. I do know it is good, but that is not so important unless talking about constant change is something we're going to focus on right now. It's when you go to Dunkin' Donuts in a new place, and every Dunkin' Donuts across the country is the same place, a portal to that very same experience of being in a place. Are poems the same? Maybe good ones are. Ancestors are ancestors. Is it good to have art contradict itself? It is a matter of how it does this. Does it communicate the uncanny? Does it alter your body? Or does it just confuse? If it just confuses or just clarifies, then it is much less. Spirit moves through all things. The storm is the interplay. It was a rough magic. The older I get, the more risk-averse I get, including with spiritual practice. Point being, rough magics I've learned to avoid in favor of the less intense and safer practices. But it's an expensive, ruined house. We go in and read from the spell book, and my friends disappear. Writing like this, you saw words. They flashed intermittently on the surface of reality like old neon. How possible is it to know how much in words we are, as in the obvious times of trying to speak a foreign language on the spot, and sorting through various translations in a moment before saying something, and this chaos is happening all the time? How possible is it to know that? It was bubbling up in the guest of time. He'd married a different woman, a different person, a language. She had a dream, she disappeared. She reappeared. There was a dream of the way. She looked out and the edge of town multiplied. Most dreams I have involve wandering and quiet adventures. For anyone to tell a great artist, a really great one, whoever that might be for you, to do the right thing is utterly crazy and probably also unhelpful, because it would stop them from doing what they do, which is create great art which disappoints occasionally and is flawed, but great art nonetheless, the way a cow eats grass and shits out dung. Who would criticize a cow? Criticize a crow and lose some order. Criticize an owl and old ways dissolve. We dissolve in seas of ancestors. The old entertainer wears a gorilla outfit and walks through floods of cats and kittens. Who would look at the fires and dried mango leaves, old brooms, garbage, and realize that they are their own thing? And the smell of smoke from the road is pleasant. We live in an age of embarrassment, which will of course be embarrassing to future generations who will hopefully be wise enough to not care about being ashamed. A life of magic. Break the world's laws. Break the word's laws. The ocean is loud. She says she dislikes the wallpaper and my tongue is slimy. Loud as ocean. Build a prayer. It is human. The waves stole an owl. The words are a symptom of discomfort, but nature is kind. Understanding is expensive, but it seems like if we can set ourselves right, find the good voice, the right voice that leads to coordination, maybe it's not so expensive, and the next move becomes apparent naturally enough. I realized the other day that the self was not in me, not centralized in me at all, and out there, the world, but also not localized. So then why can't I know everything? Back when I knew everything, some number of eyes had conquered them. It's cloud time, a cloud of eyes. Clouds cover everything, a mist, a dust. Other people's judgments are useful a little bit to keep me in line because I do get inflated, but not really that often, so that judgment is not that needful usually. A life of magic, break the world's nature, make a bonfire of dreams. We are imperfect, but we owe it to the world to be good people above great artists. There's enough great art already anyway, so creating something should be easy on you. You can make something good, even great, but we've got backups in the form of all the great works. The wound isn't exactly where I thought it was, under layers of shirts. Clouds of ancestors cover the sun. We trust illness when we shouldn't. We trust pointlessness. We trust meaninglessness. To simplify, whatever truly creates deep happiness is good as a process or thing, and this is simple enough to understand. Going to a European cafe, the girl and I get small, dark cups of coffee and pastries. The death horse had beautiful blood. They were nice, and it was the ancestors, meaning time. It was time that manifested. Enjoy time. The words are a symptom of alienation in the ancestors. The forms come alive. Aliveness is almost always the quality to be looked for. When is it not? Adventure only as a part of the fourth karma, and even that process has been described as pruning a bonsai, cutting back what's overgrown. Trees are made of crows, houses made of crows, living inside a world of birds, everything flies around. I hope there are always books, because books are beautiful as objects, as collections, as something to engage in with your mind, but of course they will not always be there. This bittersweet thought happens more as I get older, loving what existed and what I've enjoyed, hoping for it to stay or return, and also knowing it won't. Someday we will move past them and eventually the world will end. Or what if it doesn't? What if we discover someday that the idea of sun implosions and explosions is wrong, or the idea of the universe expanding and contracting? Going to a party at the mansion and Kwanda was there. Look at your own life expanding and contracting endlessly. What is better? Large or small? Scientists can't even decide if oil is healthy or not, let alone how the universe happens and then goes away. Imagine books being around forever, expanding, taking over the world, covering it like leather covers a foot, like mint will take over anything it is allowed to, like dandelions, angel grass, crabgrass. Here's to books being around forever, and to think that there's an excellent chance that this will never get published. Historically, he found that people were separate from society. They were in the branches of a dream. At the encampment in the forest, the charismatic leader paces around. Health owns your beauty, beauty owns your health. Meaning is a form. Wolves are a cloud of flying ancestors smiling on us playfully. We find ourselves searching back to enter into or touch deeper meanings that were beyond words, but this is usually just a pantomime and feeling. It's a formality. Clarity now, it's so amazing, and we have had mystical experiences of light, knowing meaning, which was predictable. Predictability is okay with liveliness. It helps the people, it helps the culture, those little worlds, the guest is the magic of that. Welcome in. Cavernous worlds of honey, society dreams yourself. I had a theory, the deeper sadnesses were most often good and healing, if not ultimate or proof. It was not the ambulances, it was not the walk, the ability to walk, to move, to be free. It points to a wildness, beauty around the nonverbal. Sitting in the ambulance with my son, he asks about the computers and the busy EMT. Checks to make sure I'm not actively bleeding or broken. I wasn't. But months later, I still have a scratch on my leg which should have been stitched, but I didn't want to deal with the emergency room again, and now it keeps opening up. The air seems too humid, and this scar, almost in the shape of Thailand, is not infected, but is also not healed. Healing is sickness, sickness is healing. The poems are escaping rhythm's function, a time of confusion. Your words manifest like a building appearing in the woods. Your words manifest ideas into songs, because many have talked, many ancestors talked. Somehow in themselves, eyes conquered them. Understanding is expensive. You assume that in order for life to be worthwhile, we need to attain some special state of happiness and peace, and that this is spiritual, and then hopefully, refresh this special state as often as possible to a kind of hard, glistening sheen over the soul. Or maybe it should just happen if you're really good. That armor should just happen very often, and you're happy. Gardens grow themselves. This is my style, very lazy, wandering around with no reason or purpose. Nothing matters much, and it feels wonderful. When laziness works, it really really works. But this is not true. I find myself constantly lying and constantly embarrassed because I don't like to lie, but if I hate it, why am I addicted to it? I'm not lazy. At least I'm not lazy. Wolves are not birds. Earth is not sky. People are not enlightened. Fairness is a matter of craftsmanship. Dream down into yourself. Find understanding. Don't be afraid of your own mind, or at least know when to be scared and cautious, when to be careless. Western perception trusts the wild beauty. Success and change pulsed away in the cities. It's a simple building married life, meaning paralyzed magic. The dark woman appears in the dream to give me a chance, and I start drooling. She gives me a napkin. Magic is the quietest thing. It really is. Happiness is functional, and the people... The ancestors took medicine, smoked, and the blood, it is loud, said things. So many things have happened in this small, strange life. Many blackbirds became golden beasts. Many hateful owls became silver trees. Many charnel skies became copper cities stretching for miles and miles. It was imaginary and changed fragility into clarity. The real, the self blurred in hysteria. The dream of language is overrated, like dream language speaking of a craft. Being, is it meaningless? I remember the alpaca farmer walking around campus with a furry beast. The brother-in-law with a large statue collection showing me his gun. The animal scurrying away under the floorboards at night in the room off the barn. So many little stories, most of them pointless but meaningful. Their house was an unknown song. Their house was beauty. He felt scared to understand what was happening. Beauty is best comfort. It's just something of the old work, confusion magic, a spell we're all under. It's a hard problem, being themselves. Your movements are vital. She was an owl. The truth is normal, bubbling up into the present like a guest. The distraction was subtle societal rhythms. The words tried this game. What is not dissolved? What is not dissolved in the sky? The words come from some odd realm. I've been noticing I can let the words bellow or flow out even when my mind is not right or not carefully gathered, and this can actually work. How bizarre, how strange. The words come from some odd realm where sin is virtue and hate is a virtue. The elocution teacher accuses me of doing it wrong on purpose, and then we dance. It evolves into an improvised musical number. This confusion is a cautious exercise. Rhythms digested otherworldly sounds. The dream beat leads to a point of vitality. Oh, my beautiful dreams. In the geocentric realms, the poets multiplied a mark, put things into a bonfire of ego. Americans are reasonable. My surprise when the political violence didn't shock others or sober them. Melodramatic ideas of decency are precious to us. The discontinuous ways were a game. The owl was a game. The owl was stolen. The owl was a rhythm. She who shines. It was quiet. The more so mind was loud, as was time. Fertility stormed the blood. Symptoms repeated to make a point. I saw a bobcat in my dreams a long time ago and forgot until recently when I was reading through an old journal. I saw real bobcats for the first time last week. First one running in front of me, then two running together into some mamwang trees. There is some constant interplay between the actual surreality of the dreamlike world and the desire for a dreamlike quality. I'm saying they exist side by side, the actual dream and the hoped for, yearned for dreaminess, and when they press on each other, the feedback produces electricity, which arises, not whenever we want it, but it does appear. Wandering around in the Caribbean looking for an ATM, I wander into a Taoist temple. I am pointless, pointlessness, television and nature are speech and knowledge. Do we choose health? Choice is wonderful, but it's a vast world, like any word, which is basically to say that words are mirages, dreams flickering over a surface of more real feelings and energy so that any word can be just about anything. I wander in the university and enjoy myself. Craftsmanship is the opposite of pointlessness. Information is spiritual. The art is loud with insects like containing a prayer. It pulses particularly when approached by the insects. It's predictable, the old poets like a sedative, the magic of sleep. The old ones keep disappearing and fewer are around, and some things we should keep. Some things are worth passing down, at least I think so. It's up to them, the young ones. They are the future ancestors. Arise, the old poets, in a bonfire of practitioners. They grew branches. The walls were always fragile. Somehow this impacts the use and importance of art. Look beyond the words. Less than clear, the symptoms of language. When you like a poem, you like a poet. You want their world. You want to move into their house. Then you take over and kick them out. But it's okay because they've already moved on to writing another poem.